The auction hall smelled of imported roses and expensive regret. Isla Chen stood near the marble pillar, her cream dress, the nicest thing she owned, bought 3 years ago for an anniversary that never came. Feeling suddenly cheap under the weight of so much wealth. She shouldn't have come. The invitation had been a mistake, a cruel clerical error that placed her name on the guest list for the Hartwell Foundation Gala, the same charity event her ex-husband's new wife was hosting. But she'd come anyway. Pride, her mother always said, was both her greatest strength and her fatal flaw. Her fingers gripped the stem of her untouched champagne glass. Across the room she could see him. Trevor, her ex-husband of 2 years, his arm wrapped possessively around Vanessa's waist. Vanessa, with her perfect blonde waves and family money and the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to choose between groceries and electricity. Trevor's eyes found hers across the crowd. He smiled. Not the warm smile she'd once loved, but something sharp and deliberate. He leaned down, whispered something to Vanessa, and they began walking toward her. Isla's throat tightened. She couldn't do this. Not tonight. Not when she'd spent the last 6 months rebuilding herself from the ruins of their divorce, working double shifts at the hospital just to keep her mother's medical bills paid, just to prove she could survive without his charity. 3 feet away now. Trevor's cologne, the same one she'd bought him for their first Christmas, reached her before his voice did. Isla, didn't expect to see you here. His tone was friendly, public, but his eyes held mockery. I thought, well, given everything, I assumed this crowd might be a bit out of your price range now. Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. The ring was bigger than the one Isla had worn. Of course it was. I was invited, Isla managed, hating how small her voice sounded. Of course, of course. Trevor's smile widened. Charity begins at home, right? Or in this case, charity extends to, well. He didn't finish, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Isla's vision blurred at the edges. This was a mistake. She needed to leave, needed to. And then she saw him. Tall, impossibly so, standing near the bar with the kind of stillness that suggested he was used to the world rearranging itself around him. Dark hair, sharp jawline, a suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. He was alone, staring at his phone with an expression of profound disinterest in everything around him. Darian Cross. She recognized him from the business magazines at the hospital waiting room. Tech mogul. Billionaire. 34 and already legendary for turning failing companies into empires. Also legendary for never smiling in photographs and never dating anyone longer than 3 months. The idea hit her like lightning. Reckless, desperate, insane. But Trevor was still talking, his voice dripping with false concern about her situation. And Vanessa was looking at her with that particular kind of pity that felt like being flayed alive, and Isla's feet were moving before her brain could catch up. She walked straight toward the billionaire. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was crazy. This was social suicide. This was... Her hand reached out, fingers brushing the expensive fabric of his sleeve. He looked up, gray eyes meeting hers with surprise, then suspicion. "Pretend like we're dating, please," Isla whispered, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Her voice cracked. "Just for 5 minutes. I'll explain everything, I promise, but right now I need..." She didn't finish. Couldn't finish. Because Trevor and Vanessa had followed her, were standing right there, watching this humiliation unfold in real time. "Isla." Trevor's voice held confused amusement. "What are you?" Darian Cross's eyes moved from Isla's face to Trevor's, then back again. For 3 endless seconds nobody moved. Then something shifted in those gray eyes. Something sharp and calculating and almost protective. His hand came up, fingers wrapping gently around Isla's wrist. "Darling," he said, his voice low and smooth as smoke, "I was wondering where you'd gone." The word darling hung in the air like a spell neither of them could take back. Isla's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to say yes. Hadn't expected the way his thumb now pressed gently against her pulse point, as if checking to see if she was real. His hand was warm, solid, and for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel like she was drowning. Trevor's face had gone pale, then red. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Darian didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on Isla's face, reading something there she didn't know she was showing. When he finally turned to acknowledge Trevor, his expression was polite, distant, the way someone might look at a piece of furniture they were considering removing. Darian Cross. He didn't extend his hand. "And you are?" "Trevor Chen. Isla's." Trevor faltered, seeming to realize that saying ex-husband would reveal too much. "We know each other. I'm just surprised because Isla never mentioned." "I don't make a habit of discussing my personal life in professional settings," Darian interrupted smoothly. His fingers laced through Isla's, and she fought the urge to flinch at how natural it felt. "Isla prefers to keep things private. I respect that." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her social radar picking up on something. "How long have you two been seeing each other?" Isla opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She hadn't thought this through. Hadn't prepared a timeline, a story, any of the details that would make this lie believable. She was going to be exposed in seconds, humiliated even worse than before. 6 months, Darian said, his voice carrying just enough warmth to sound convincing. "We met at Mercy General. I was visiting a friend in the ICU, and Isla was coming off a double shift." He turned to her, and something in his eyes made her stomach flip. "You were exhausted. You had coffee stains on your scrubs. And you still stopped to help an elderly man find his wife's room." The detail was so specific, so tender, that for a moment even Isla almost believed it had happened. Trevor's jaw tightened. She knew that look, the one he got when something slipped beyond his control. "Mercy, General? You're still working there? I thought after the divorce I assumed you'd want something better." "I love my work," Isla said, finding her voice. Darian's hand squeezed hers, encouragement or warning she couldn't tell. "Saving lives feels better than a lot of things." The barb landed. Trevor had been in finance, had always dismissed her nursing career as cute, but not a real profession. He'd wanted her to quit, to be the kind of wife who hosted dinner parties and didn't come home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. Well, Vanessa's smile had gone brittle. "It's lovely that you found someone who appreciates simplicity." She turned to Darian. "Though I have to say, Mr. Cross, you're not quite what I'd expect Isla to go for. Trevor always said she preferred men who were more accessible." The insult was wrapped in silk, but it was still an insult. Darian's expression didn't change, but Isla felt his body tense beside her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made his words cut deeper. "I find that people often misjudge what others need," he said. Trevor may have known a version of Isla, but people change. They grow. Sometimes they realize they deserved better than what they settled for. The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor's face had gone from red to white. Vanessa's grip on his arm looked painful. Around them, other guests had started to notice the tension, conversations dropping to curious murmurs. "We should go," Vanessa said tightly. But Trevor wasn't done. His eyes fixed on Isla with something ugly and familiar. "This is pathetic, Isla. You really expect people to believe that someone like him would be interested in you? You can barely afford that dress you're wearing. You drive a car that's held together with duct tape and prayer. And now you're what? Playing Cinderella with a billionaire." Each word was a punch, each one designed to remind her of every failure, every bill she'd struggled to pay, every night she'd cried alone in their old apartment after he'd left her for someone who fit better into his upward trajectory. Isla felt her facade cracking, felt the tears burning behind her eyes. She'd made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake, and now, Darian moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but with the kind of deliberate certainty that made everyone in a 10-foot radius stop and watch. He stepped slightly in front of Isla, his body a barrier between her and Trevor's words. "Here's what's going to happen," Darian said, his voice soft but carrying an edge that could cut glass. "You're going to walk away. You're going to rejoin the party. And you're never going to speak to Isla like that again." He paused. Because if you do, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure that every door in this city that's currently open to you slams shut so fast you'll feel the wind from 3 blocks away." Trevor laughed, but it sounded nervous. "You can't be serious. Over her. She's nobody. She's the woman I'm with," Darian interrupted. "Which makes her somebody you don't want as an enemy." His hand found Isla's again, and this time when he looked at her, there was something raw in his eyes. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Now leave. Before I forget that this is supposed to be a civilized event." For a long moment, Trevor just stared. Then Vanessa was pulling him away, whispering urgently, and they were retreating into the crowd like water around a stone. Isla realized she was shaking. Darian's hand was still holding hers. He didn't let go. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I didn't mean to drag you into my mess. I just saw you and I panicked and—" "Breathe," he said quietly. She did. Once, twice, 3 times. "I need air," she managed. He nodded. Without a word, still holding her hand, he led her through the crowd, past the curious stares and whispered speculation, out through the tall glass doors onto the terrace. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. The city spread out below them, 1,000 lights pretending to be stars. Isla pulled her hand free, wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm sorry," she said again. God, that was insane. You don't even know me. I just put you in the middle of my pathetic drama, and you played along like it mattered." Darian finished. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Yeah." She laughed, but it came out broken. "My ex-husband was right. This is pathetic. I'm pathetic. I came here tonight thinking I could prove something, and instead I just proved that I'm still the same desperate woman he left." "He's an idiot," Darian said flatly. Isla looked up, surprised. "Anyone who looks at you and sees something to belittle is an idiot," he continued. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was stating an obvious truth. "You're a nurse. You work double shifts. You help elderly men find their wives in hospital corridors." He paused. "Those aren't the actions of someone pathetic. Those are the actions of someone who gives a damn. Which is rarer than you'd think." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, and she couldn't stop them. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But I know men like him. Men who need to make others small so they can feel big." Something dark crossed his face. "My father was like that. Spent my whole childhood telling me I'd never amount to anything. That I was too quiet, too strange, too focused on the wrong things." Isla wiped at her tears. "What did you do?" "I proved him wrong," Darian said simply. "Built an empire. Made more money than he could count. And you know what? He still found ways to tear me down. Because that's what people like that do. It's not about you, Isla. It never was. It's about them needing someone to hurt." The words settled into her chest like medicine. Bitter but healing. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. Darian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost vulnerable. "Because I saw your face when he was talking to you. And I recognized it." He looked away, jaw tight. "I know what it feels like to be made invisible. To have someone you loved treat you like you're nothing." "Did someone hurt you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His laugh was hollow. "My ex-fiancée. 3 years ago. She left me 2 weeks before the wedding. Said I was emotionally unavailable. That I cared more about my work than her. That loving me was like loving a statue, cold and unresponsive." He looked back at Isla. Maybe she was right. I don't know. But I know what it cost me. And I know I never want to feel that small again. Isla's heart ached. Here was this powerful, untouchable man, and underneath all that armor was just someone who'd been broken too. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be." He stepped closer. "We all have our scars. The question is what we do with them." They stood in silence for a while, the city breathing below them, the sounds of the gala muted behind glass doors. Isla's tears had dried, leaving salt tracks on her cheeks. She felt raw, exposed, but somehow not ashamed. There was something about Darian's presence, the way he didn't try to fix her or comfort her with empty words, that made the vulnerability feel okay. "So what now?" she asked finally. "Everyone in there thinks we're dating. By tomorrow morning, it'll be all over social media. Billionaire Darian Cross spotted with mystery woman. Your privacy will be ruined." "I don't care about privacy," he said, surprising her. "I care about control. And right now." He tilted his head, considering. "Right now, this feels like the most honest thing I've done in years." Pretending to date someone is honest. More honest than the real relationships I've had. His smile was sad. "At least with you, I know exactly what this is. No expectations. No disappointments waiting around the corner." Isla studied his face, the sharp lines, the carefully maintained distance in his eyes. "You're lonely," she said softly. It wasn't a question. He didn't deny it. "Aren't you?" "Terribly." The admission came easier than she expected. "I thought after Trevor left, I'd find myself again. Become this strong, independent woman who didn't need anyone. And I did become stronger. I did learn to stand on my own." She looked down at her hands. "But God, some nights the silence in my apartment is so loud I can't breathe." Darian moved closer, until he was standing right beside her at the terrace railing. Their shoulders almost touched. "What would help?" he asked. "Right now, in this moment, what would make the silence quieter?" Isla thought about it. Really thought. "Knowing I'm not alone in feeling this way," she said finally. "Knowing that even people who look like they have everything figured out are still human, still scared, still searching for something real." "You're not alone," Darian said, and there was something fierce in his voice. "I have $17 billion. I have houses on 3 continents. I have more power than most people dream of." He paused. "And I go home every night to an empty penthouse and wonder what the point of any of it is if there's no one there who actually knows me." The confession hung between them, fragile and true. "I know this is crazy," Isla said slowly, "but what if we didn't let this end tonight?" Darian turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean." She took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that felt wild and impossible. "Everyone already thinks we're together. And you just said you're lonely. And I'm lonely. And maybe we could continue this. Not as a real relationship, but as..." She struggled for the word. "As companions. Friends. People who understand what it's like to be broken and still show up anyway." "You want to keep pretending?" "I want to keep being honest," she corrected. "This right here, right now, this feels more real than any date I've been on in years. You see me. Not Nurse Isla or Broke Isla or Trevor's pathetic ex-wife Isla. Just me." She met his eyes. "And I think maybe I see you too. Not the billionaire. Not the mogul. Just Darian." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or hope or fear. Possibly all 3. "What would that look like?" he asked carefully. Isla smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time all night. "I have no idea. Maybe we get coffee sometimes. Maybe we text each other when the silence gets too loud. Maybe we show up to events together and let people think whatever they want to think." She shrugged. "Maybe we just figure it out as we go." "No expectations." "No expectations," she confirmed. "Just 2 people choosing not to be alone." Darian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. "Okay. But I have conditions." "Of course you do." She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. "First, honesty. Always. If this stops working for either of us, we say so. No games, no hurt feelings." "Agreed." "Second, you let me help you. I saw the way you tensed when Trevor mentioned your car. I'm guessing money is tight. Isla started to pull her hand back, but he held firm. Not charity, he said quickly. Partnership. You're giving me something I can't buy, real company, honest conversation, someone who doesn't want anything from me except presence. Let me give you something back. Financial stability. Security. A life where you're not choosing between your mother's medication and your own meals. Her throat tightened. How did you? I'm observant. And I run background checks on everyone I meet. He had the grace to look slightly apologetic. Occupational hazard. I know about your mother's Alzheimer's. The medical bills. The double shifts. His voice softened. Let me help Isla. Not because you need saving, but because partners help each other. She wanted to say no. Wanted to cling to her pride, her independence, all the things she'd built from the wreckage of her marriage. But she was so tired. So tired of fighting alone. Okay, she whispered. But third condition, you let me help you too. I don't need. Yes, you do. She squeezed his hand. You need someone to remind you that you're human. Someone to call you out when you're hiding behind your money and your power. Someone to sit with you in the silence and make it less lonely. She stepped closer. Let me do that. Let me be your friend, Darian. Your real friend. His eyes were bright, almost wet. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, she admitted. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we learn together. For the first time since she'd met him an hour ago, Darian Cross smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, softer, achingly vulnerable. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said, or the most reckless. Can't I be both? He laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. Yeah, I think you can. Behind them, the terrace door opened. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. Mr. Cross? They're starting the speeches soon. Ms. Hartwell asked if you'd be joining the main hall. Darian looked at Isla, a question in his eyes. She straightened her cream dress, wiped the last traces of tears from her face, and nodded. Together. Together, he confirmed. They walked back into the gala side by side. This time, when people stared, Isla didn't flinch. This time, she had someone beside her who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stay anyway. Trevor was across the room, watching. His face was a mixture of confusion and something that might have been regret. Vanessa was pulling at his arm, trying to get him to leave, but his eyes stayed fixed on Isla. She didn't look away. Didn't hide. Instead, she leaned slightly into Darian's side, letting herself take comfort in his solid presence. Thank you, she said quietly, so only he could hear. For what? For seeing me when I felt invisible. Darian's hand found hers again, fingers interlacing. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be seen. The speeches started. Some CEO droned on about charitable giving and corporate responsibility, but Isla barely heard it. She was too focused on the warmth of Darian's hand in hers, the way he occasionally glanced over to make sure she was okay, the soft smile that played at the corners of his mouth. This wasn't what she'd expected when she'd walked into the gala tonight. She'd come prepared for humiliation, for pain, for proof that she'd never be enough. Instead, she'd found something else entirely. Someone who was just as broken as she was, just as lonely, just as desperate for something real in a world that felt increasingly fake. Maybe it wouldn't last. Maybe in a week or a month, they'd realize this arrangement was too complicated, too messy, too built on shaky foundations. But right now, in this moment, it felt like hope. And after 2 years of darkness, hope was everything. 3 weeks later, Isla's phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. She was used to late-night calls, came with being a nurse, but the name on the screen made her sit up in bed. Darian. Hello. Her voice was rough with sleep. I'm sorry. He sounded strained. I know it's late. I shouldn't have called. What's wrong? Silence. Then, I'm sitting in my penthouse. 17,000 square feet. View of the entire city. And I feel like I'm suffocating." Isla was already out of bed, reaching for her jeans. "What's your address?" "You don't have to." "Address, Darian." He gave it. She was in her car, the duct-taped one Trevor had mocked, 15 minutes later. The building was obscene. All glass and steel, and doormen who looked at her beat-up Honda like it might contaminate the driveway. But Darian had called ahead, and they let her up without question. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt endless. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, she found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, still in his suit from whatever late meeting he'd been in. He didn't turn around. "My father died," he said to the glass. 2 hours ago. Heart attack. He was 73. Isla's heart clenched. "Darian, I'm so sorry." "I'm not." His voice was flat. "That's the problem. I got the call, and my first thought was, good. My first thought was that maybe now I could stop trying to prove him wrong. Stop building empires just to show him I wasn't worthless." He finally turned, and his eyes were devastated. What kind of person feels relief when their father dies? "The kind who spent their whole life being hurt by him," Isla said gently. She crossed the space between them, took his hands in hers. "Grief isn't simple, Darian. You can be sad that you lost him and relieved that he can't hurt you anymore. Both things can be true." His jaw clenched. "I wanted him to say he was proud of me. Just once. Before he died. I wanted." His voice broke. "God, I'm pathetic. You're human." She pulled him into her arms, and after a moment's resistance, he folded. His head dropped to her shoulder, and she felt his body shake with silent sobs. They stood like that for a long time, Isla holding him while he fell apart, his expensive suit getting damp with tears, his carefully maintained control dissolving in the safety of her presence. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer. "I called you," he said, like he was just realizing it. "Out of everyone I know, all my business associates, my board members, the people who depend on me, I called you." "I'm glad you did." "Why?" He searched her face. "Why are you here, Isla? We barely know each other. This arrangement we have, it's not real. You don't owe me this." "It feels pretty real to me," she said softly. "And maybe that's the point. We didn't come together because of romance or attraction or any of the normal reasons. We came together because we were both drowning, and we found someone who understood what that felt like." She touched his face gently. "That's more real than most relationships I've seen." "I'm falling for you," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out raw and unguarded. "I know that wasn't the deal. I know we said no expectations. But these past 3 weeks, having coffee with you on Tuesday mornings, texting you about stupid things at midnight, knowing there's someone out there who actually gives a damn if I'm okay." He stopped, looking almost scared. "I can't pretend anymore, Isla. I don't want to pretend." Her heart was racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want this to be real. Not fake dating, not companionship, not an arrangement. Real. Messy. Terrifying." His hands came up to frame her face. "I want to take you to dinner and call it a date. I want to meet your mother. I want to fall asleep knowing you're in my life not because we made a deal, but because we chose each other." Tears were sliding down Isla's cheeks. "I'm scared." "Me too. Trevor destroyed me. It took me 2 years to feel like a person again. If I do this, if I let myself fall for you, and you decide I'm not enough." "You're everything," Darian interrupted fiercely. "You're brave and kind and strong, and you see me. Really see me. Not my money, not my power. Just me." His thumb brushed away her tears. "I'm terrified too. Terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll prove my ex right and be too broken to love properly. But I'd rather try and fail with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Isla's chest felt too full, like her heart was expanding beyond what her ribs could contain. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. But somewhere between the gala and the coffee dates and the midnight texts, you became important, necessary, home. Say yes," he breathed. "Please, Isla." Let me take you to dinner tomorrow. Let me do this right. Let me prove that this us can be something beautiful. She thought about Trevor, about the marriage that had taught her she wasn't enough, about the 2 years she'd spent building walls to keep the hurt out. Then she thought about Darian, about the way he'd defended her without hesitation, about his late-night calls when the loneliness got too loud, about the way he looked at her like she was precious, valuable, worth protecting. Maybe love wasn't about finding someone perfect. Maybe it was about finding someone who saw your broken pieces and stayed anyway. Yes, she said. Yes to dinner. Yes to dates. Yes to giving this a real chance. His smile was incandescent. Yeah. Yeah. She laughed, giddy and terrified and hopeful all at once. Let's figure this out together. No more pretending. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time since Trevor had walked out, Isla felt something she'd forgotten was possible. She felt chosen. Not as a placeholder, not as someone to pass the time with, but as herself. Messy, scarred, imperfect, real. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Darian rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For being brave enough to ask a stranger for help. For reminding me that vulnerability isn't weakness. For choosing me back." Outside the windows, the city was beginning to wake. Dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, the promise of a new day, a fresh start. They stood together in the growing light, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. 6 months later, Isla stood in that same penthouse, but everything was different. Her mother was downstairs with a full-time caregiver. One Darian had insisted on hiring. The medical bills were paid. Isla had cut back to normal shifts, finally able to breathe. But more than that, she was happy. Genuinely, impossibly happy. Darian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About the gala," she said. "About how desperate I was. How small I felt. And now," she turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. "Now I feel seen. Loved. Chosen." She kissed him softly. "You saved me that night." "We saved each other," he corrected. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Permission to be human. To be vulnerable. To stop performing and just be." They swayed gently, dancing to music only they could hear. "I ran into Trevor last week," Isla mentioned. "At the hospital. His wife was having a baby." Darian tensed. And nothing. He congratulated me on our engagement." She touched the ring on her finger. Simple, elegant, chosen together. "I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt. Just gratitude. Gratitude. That he left." She smiled. "Because if he hadn't, I never would have been desperate enough to approach a stranger at a gala. Never would have found you. Never would have discovered that the love I thought I'd lost was just making room for something better." Darian's eyes were bright. "I love you," he said, like the words still surprised him. "I love you too." And she meant it. Wholly, completely, without reservation. They'd started as strangers, became pretenders, then friends, then something neither of them had expected. Partners in the truest sense. Two people who'd been broken by love and learned to trust it again. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were hard days, difficult conversations, moments when old wounds ached. But they faced them together. And that, Isla realized, was the real miracle. Not the money or the security or the escape from her old life. But this. Being known, being seen, being loved exactly as she was. She'd walked into that gala believing she was nobody. And walked out discovering she was somebody's everything. Sometimes the best love stories don't start with love at all. They start with courage. With desperation that becomes hope. With two broken people brave enough to say, "I see you. I choose you. Let's figure this out together." And somehow, impossibly, that becomes everything.